Good morning, Monday, July 23rd. So let's take a look at the oil chart. We are about a half hour into the open here this morning. So we're going to start with a 4-hour candlestick chart and get a better overview of where the market is. So currently we could see where it's trading. It is above last week's high, which would be in here. And it's also coming up on the 69.22 area, or is around the 69.22 area, which would represent the 2 weeks ago the low. Okay, so we could see a structure or a balance up here. We could see a break down what would have been the previous low for that week, and then last week we could see that oil stayed basically down below that previous week's low, and now we're back up to it. So we know last week we had the EIA report, and the actual inventory number itself was a miss. They were looking for a draw, and instead the report showed a build. Now, the one caveat to that was that the gasoline stocks did show a draw, and in my personal opinion, I think that is probably what drove the market reaction, kind of a quick reaction lower, and then an immediately reversal higher. So if we think about the market breaking back up over this previous week low of 69.22, that's going to bring it back up into this area here. So we're going to have to take a closer look at this. Now, there really isn't much in here other than a couple of days worth of balance within a range. You know, there's going to be those static or obvious highs and lows. So what we'll do is we'll probably combine these profiles together and develop some kind of summary. And we could see that we have a couple of other reference levels that are pretty close here. Okay, and we can see that, you know, should the market get back up into this area, this whole piece of structure here would offer some amount of containment with a break above, looking to fill in some of this profile here. Okay, so let's take a more detailed look at it on a TPO chart. All right, so let's take a look at a TPO chart so we can see Friday's profile represented here. Okay, we could see where it closed, 68.22. This is going to be last night's Globex or overnight session. Okay, so this is partial Friday, and then this is going to be Sunday into Monday. Okay, so let's expand this a little bit more. Now, one thing that I talked about in a previous video was the fact that, you know, with regards to oil, we have scheduled releases of data, meaning we know that something is going to be released at a specific time. And then we also have the unscheduled bits of news and various other things. So one thing that we can add to that list are tweets from the president. Okay, so we could see if we look here, the overnight session stayed pretty much balanced throughout the night or neutral. Okay, so it did stay within Friday's profile in general, and it also stayed within Friday's value area. Okay, and then we could see at the end here it makes a sharp move up. Okay, so it appears that most of this can be attributable to the the tweets this morning from Trump in regards to oil and Iran. Okay, so certainly something to be aware of. You know, being involved in trades, have to understand that at any point, you know, something can hit the wires and create a reaction. Okay, so we can see that happening here, and it's currently up here, as we can see. So let's get into some of the details for the day. Talked about the overnight session. We can see where it ended up here or closed, and we could see where the day session for Monday today opened. So this open is going to represent the possibility or potential to open a gap. So we can see that the open is above or outside of Friday's previous range. Okay, so if the price does not trade back down to this previous high here throughout some point in this day session, there will be a new gap opened here. Now, generally speaking, with oil, in a situation like this, I would be looking for this to come back down and fill here. So we know that oil does open gaps, but out of all of the opportunities to open a gap, it tends to come back down and fill the gap sometime during the day session. Not that that has to happen today. And obviously, there's other things to take into consideration. So today we know we have, you know, some headlines early on, so that can certainly factor into to what this does today. Okay, so what we can do is we can kind of tighten things up a little bit in terms of start to look at the opening range and the initial balance. So ideally what I would like to look for is, or what I would like to see is a pretty tight initial balance range, overnight or opening range and initial balance range, and then we would look for a break of that. So if we had a tight range and then we got a break underneath, then we could certainly expect price to possibly come down to fill what would be this open gap down here. All right, so let's take a look at some of the reference level on the lower end. So if price does come down to this previous high, we know that that would have filled any possibility to open a new gap from here. So from there we get back down into Friday's profile, so we can see where Friday closed, which would have been 68.22. The point of control for the TPO chart would have been around there as well, and we can clearly see the value area from Friday with the overnight low pretty much maintaining that. Okay, now I added another level here, so 68.30. This is going to be the mid-balance section, or this previous area that we've been in. So it's a high volume node back from 523. So we could see that these two levels, or reference levels, are within 8 ticks of each other. Okay, so if the market should come down through here and back into this profile, this would be an area that I would be looking at as far as does it hold this previous close, or does it rotate just back down to this overnight low, and then from there we have this previous low here. Okay, if we look at a couple of other levels on the downside, so we're going to see a 622 low here at 67.07. Okay, and then there's some other levels below it, an open gap at 66.22. So let's take a look at the top side. So we have the previous week's low, which is here. It's hard to see because the levels are overlapping. And we also have this overnight high here. Okay, so when we looked at the 4-hour chart, we said that the market being up here is above last week's previous high, and it's also up here knocking on this previous week's low level. Okay, so the question becomes, does it break above, or does it stay within, or does it stay capped by this overnight high and below here? Okay, so we're going to take a look at the overnight or the opening range and the initial balance. We certainly want to know what the range is on that, because that's going to help us determine whether or not we should take any trades on a break above or below. So let's take a look at some of the reference levels up top here. So we have the two things that we talked about, the previous week low here, 69.22. We have the overnight high, 69.23, and then we also have this 50-day SMA, simple moving average, at 69.55, and then the round number of 70, an open gap here at 70.31. Okay, so what we're going to have to do is keep an eye or understand whether or not the market is going to make a move above, and then if it does, then we're going to break down this section up here. Okay, so we're going to stick with these levels. Okay, so we're going to stick with these levels here. We're going to see if we can get up to fill this open gap. Okay, should it get up into this area, we have a couple of profiles that we can lean on. And essentially the easiest thing to do is probably just to combine these together and get one summary picture. So it'll give us a point of control with some reference of the value area. And there's also some mechanical reference levels that we can lean on, but most of them are pointed out, as we can see. So we have, this would have been the previous week's low, this would fill the open gap. Okay, so I think that concludes this morning review. Let's summarize what we just talked about so we can see what the overnight session did. We know we had some tweets from the president this morning. We can see that the overnight made a high that came up to this previous week's low here at 69.22. Okay, so we have those two reference levels there. We know that the market opened this morning. It opened out of the previous range. Okay, so that's going to present the opportunity to form an open gap in here should price not come down. So I I would be leaning towards price coming down to fill this previous high, but of course that doesn't have to happen, and we also have the headlines that we need to take into consideration as well. So what we'll do is we'll watch the opening range and the initial balance and see what we get in terms of range. So a tighter range could lead to a better trade of a break of the initial balance high or low, and certainly a tighter range up here, and then a break of the balance low could bring us down here to close what would be an open gap. Okay, so I think that's it. We'll take a look at it tonight and see how things worked out.